The Tales of Max and Hero by Alexandra Moore and Anna Walford. Tall tales. Collywobbles. That was the only word to describe it. Max, the extra long sausage dog, felt like nervous bubbles in his tummy were having a really good party. Taking a deep breath, he crept through the big iron gates to the entrance to the park. There was so much to see. He felt tiny as he stared up at the gigantic tall trees. Their branches stretched out like long, scary arms with sharp claws. He tiptoed past them, hoping the grumbling sounds in his tummy wouldn't give him away. He was about to make a run towards a group of fun-looking dogs when he heard something barking at him. As he turned, he saw a hairy puppy who looked like a ball of fluff bouncing towards him. "Hello there," barked the fluff ball. "I hope you don't mind, but I saw you walking through the gate, and it looks like it's your first day in here too. What's your name?" he said. "Shh, they might hear you," Maximus whispered, looking up at the tall trees. "Who? What? Those old things?" the fluff ball barked back. "Oh, they're far too old. They won't be able to hear us or see us all the way down here. Their ears are probably full of woodworms anyway," he giggled. Max wasn't completely convinced by this, but admired the puppy's confidence. "I'm called Maximus, but you can call me Max." "Maximus? What a funny name," replied the ball of fluff. "That's because I look like a stretched out sausage," Max replied. "Oh, yeah, that would explain it. I'm called Hero because I'm so big and I'm so brave," he replied. "Definitely big," chuckled Max, looking at Hero's rather round tummy. "That's because I have big bones, and I may have found out where the treat jar is hidden." Hero grinned. Max had already decided Hero would be his friend. "Excuse me," came a voice from behind them. Max and Hero turned, and towering over them was a tall, skinny-legged, white, frizzy thing that looked as though it had rolled in candy floss. "Who and what are you?" Max and Hero both asked. "I'm Noodle the Poodle." "What's a poople?" asked Hero. "I said poodle," she barked at him. "We are the cleverest and the most beautiful of all the dogs and should always be admired." Noodle stretched out her paw delicately. "I'm also a French poodle, not just any old poodle, you know." "Ooh," both Max and Hero cooed. "Is that why you have a funny bark and diamonds that sparkle and twinkle round your neck?" asked Hero. "I can see you both need teaching in paw law," sighed Noodle. Max looked confused. "Paw law? Is that the book of rules for all dogs?" She paused and straightened her back. "I'll start at the beginning. You do not shake hands like the humosaurs do when they meet for the first time." "What's a humosaurus?" Max and Hero asked, looking puzzled. "Oh dear." Noodle put a weary paw over her face. "A humosaurus is the two-legged creature who feeds, walks, and loves you," she continued. "Do you mean my mummy?" asked Hero. "You will not call them your mummy," Noodle barked at him. "Their proper name is humosaurus, and they go back thousands of years. Now, as I was going to say before I was rudely interrupted, when dogs say hello, they give each other a sniff on the bottom." She paused. "The bottom?" Max and Hero burst out laughing. "Yes, the bottom," she replied. "Ew," they both screamed. "Disgusting." "Oh dear, you have so much to learn. We're all different shapes and sizes. I mean, look at you, Max. You look like a sausage. Although I will admit a rather handsome one." Hero definitely saw Noodle blush. "And Hero, you look exactly like a tubby, hairy teddy bear. Now, as I was saying, if you like their smell, you shall be friends. If not, you will move on to the next. So it's important to give them a good sniffy sniff." Max and Hero were trying to concentrate, but there was so much to remember. "Then, if there is fox poo, roll in it," she continued. "What?" shrieked Max and Hero. "Yuck!" "If you must know, it's a wonderful perfume that smells like strawberries rolled in rainbows. and it sticks on your fur and makes your humosaurus scream with happiness. I think, she continued. Max and Hero liked the sound of that. Suddenly, there was a great gust of wind, and the trees swooshed and swayed above them. Max and Hero shivered and backed behind Noodle. It scares me, Max whispered, looking up at the tall old tree as the wind whistled through the branches. Ah, yes, well, you should be a little scared. It isn't called the Dog Cruncher Grizzly Gobbler for nothing, you know. Noodle turned and looked with wide eyes as the two puppies cowered behind her. What did you call it? Max stuttered. I can't say its name again. It straightens my curls, Noodle said. It eats dogs as yummy snacks. I think it's only eaten old dogs so far, but they are always the naughty ones. I've seen its branches swoop down and gobble dogs up in seconds. Windy days are its favourite, as it's much easier to scoop them up. Noodle was getting more and more excited with her story, waving her paws around. Just then, a funny little snorty dog joined them. Hello, I'm Stanley, he snuffled. He was very small, very muscular, and very blonde. He had pointy up ears with a squished up nose, as if a wall had walked into him. He sounded like he was snoring, even though he was wide awake. What's going on? Why are you puppy shaking? What's happening? He asked. Shh, Stanley. I was just in the middle of telling the story about the Dog Cruncher Grizzly Gobbler. Remember the one I was telling you yesterday? Noodle looked cross at being interrupted. Ooh, have you told them about the hot dog? Stanley snorted, a little less loudly, while nervously looking up at the tree. Oh, yes, I nearly forgot. Yesterday I was minding my own business when I caught the Dog Cruncher Grizzly Gobbler eating what looked like a hot dog. And we all know what they're made of, Noodle said, grinning mischievously. She stopped and looked straight at Max. In fact, it looked a lot like you. Anyone gone missing in your family recently? She asked Max, a little too enthusiastically. Max started counting his relatives on his paws, but was interrupted by a booming bark. Hello, Max and Hero. The puppies almost jumped straight out of their collars. The biggest dog Max and Hero had ever seen lumbered towards them. Ah, this is Mr. Pee-wee. He's one of the largest dogs in the world, and the wisest, Noodle said with authority. How do you know our names? Both puppies asked. Mr. Pee-wee knows everything, barked Noodle. Both puppies just stared at Mr. Pee-wee with their mouths wide open. He was so big, their noses only reached his knees. He had thick, bushy eyebrows, wispy grey whiskers all around his chin, and a pair of spectacles balanced on the end of his nose. Oh, so sorry I'm late. My humosaurus took forever trying to decide whether she would wear the yellow spotty wellies or the ones with the pink hearts, Mr. Pee-wee grumbled. It's always the same when it looks like rain. Now, how far have you got, Noodle? He said, peering down his nose at the two puppies who were staring up at him. Well, I was just teaching them the rules of paw law, Noodle said, rather pleased with herself. And about the Dog Cruncher Grizzly Gobbler, Stanley spluttered. Noodle shot Stanley an angry look. What on earth is the Dog Cruncher Grizzly Gobbler? Mr. Pee-wee asked, looking baffled. All the puppies cautiously looked up at the big old spindly tree looming over them. Then all at once they all started barking their stories at Mr. Pee-wee. Calm down, everyone. Please tell me what these puppies are barking about, Mr. Pee-wee turned to Noodle, who had suddenly gone very quiet, and said, Noodle, have you been telling tall tales again? Remember when you said there were magical acorns that dropped from the oak tree in the park, and if you ate them, you would glow in the dark? You only admitted when you'd been telling tall tales when poor old Conkers the Spaniel had swallowed 10 of them, and instead of glowing, ended up pooping acorns for weeks. They all stared at Noodle. Her curls had turned pink with embarrassment. "So it isn't going to gobble us up?" Max asked nervously, looking up at the tree. "Don't be silly. It's only a harmless old tree. The worst thing some of them can do is apple bomb you when they're in a bad mood," Mr. Peewee smiled. Then he stopped smiling and glared at Noodle. I only wanted everyone to like me, and once I had started telling stories, I just couldn't stop," Noodle whimpered in a soft voice. "You don't need to make up stories to have friends. We like you just as you are. If you tell tales, no one will ever believe anything you say," Mr. Peewee said in a firm but kind voice. Noodle looked down at her paws. I promise I won't ever tell another lie. I guess I should probably tell you now that I'm not really from France," she blubbered. "Well, where are you from then?" Mr. Peewee looked puzzled. "I'm really from Glasgow," she sniffled. "That's in Scotland." Huge tears rolled down her long nose. Poor Noodle. She looked so upset. Hero felt rather sorry for her and thought he would cheer her up by telling her a joke. "Noodle, what kind of dog likes to have a bath?" he asked. "I don't know," she sniffled. "A shampoodle, of course," Hero replied. They all giggled. Even Noodle managed to smile. "I've got to go. My humosaurus is calling me," said Mr. Peewee, looking a little disappointed to leave his new friends. "Now, you two, I hope you've learned something on your first day. Telling tall tales will always get you into all sorts of trouble." He then waved a paw and trundled off. "See, Max, the trees can't hurt you. In fact, if you look close and you squint your eyes, they actually look like giant pieces of broccoli," Hero squeaked. Max turned and squinted up at the trees. Hero was right. They both fell about laughing. How silly Max had been to be afraid of nothing but old trees. Unless, of course, they were in a bad mood. "Oh, look, Max, there's some fox poo. Let's go and roll in it," Hero barked at his new friend. Both puppies jumped straight into the pile of poo and started stretching out and doing somersaults. How lovely and squishy it felt. Hero could hear his humosaurus chatting to Max's at the other end of the park. They both ran towards them, and as they got closer, they overheard them organising for the puppies to play the next day. "Brilliant, Hero! We're going to see each other again tomorrow," Max barked. Hero was scooped up by his humosaurus for a cuddle when she suddenly shrieked. "Ugh! Is that fox poo? What a smell! You were going straight home for a bubble bath." "Well, at least Noodle was telling the truth about that. They love it, I think," Max barked to his friend. What an eventful first day in the park it had been. Max and Hero gave each other a sniff goodbye, and they both knew they would be bestest of friends forever. Exhausted but happy, they both went back to their homes, and they had a good scrub, sparkling clean, before dozing off and climbing into their snuggly sacks, and pooped, they fell asleep.